All right, it's now time to shift into the adulthood years, and we'll start by looking at the early adulthood years, which will focus primarily on the 20s and 30s. And we'll, of course, start with that physical cognitive developmental approach. All righty, let's go ahead and take a peek at some of the issues. So your author begins by talking about a lot of physical issues, and one of those issues is obesity. We did address this, if you recall, back in the middle childhood years. We're going to address it again now in the adulthood years. Unfortunately, we have some pretty awful statistics in the United States about obesity and percentage of folks overweight. Some weight gain is typical during this period because our metabolism slows down a little bit. You'll hear folks in this age range start to complain a little bit about how it's harder to lose weight, and that is biologically true. However, we still certainly need to practice healthy behaviors to make sure that we're in the best of shape possible. As you know, there are many different kinds of negative consequences of having weight issues. So being overweight or being obese can certainly be problematic from a physical standpoint, such as high blood pressure, strokes, cancer, things of that nature. And also there's a lot of social discrimination out there. So you may be less likely to get employed. May be less likely to just get invited to participate in different kinds of events. And it's unfortunate, but it seems to be a reality. When we talk about how do we lose weight then and what really works, I'm sure you've heard about a million different types of diets out there. Well, the truth of the matter is we have to go back to the basics here. The basics are really what work best, having a well-balanced diet and exercise. I know it sounds pretty simple, but the research is pretty clear that these are, really the best ways to go about losing weight. What happens, unfortunately, is when folks go on these fad diets and they end up losing weight, because they do work in the short term. In fact, they can work pretty well in the short term. What happens, though, is that the weight dips down, and then when it starts to creep back up, which it almost always does, it actually creeps up higher to where you normally were. So a lot of these weight, reduction programs are really kind of counterproductive because they actually make you end up gaining weight at the end of the day. It's not going to take a week or two for that to happen, but as those pounds start to come back on, you often will end up putting even some additional pounds on. Whereas if you use this more well-balanced diet approach and exercise, that's going to be more long-lasting and long-term. If we take a minute to look at intellectual development and growth, and we look at some of the cognitive components of this chapter, Perry has some interesting work in this area. And basically, one of the issues that he talks about is how our thinking progresses during early adulthood. And in the beginning, many of us have what he calls dualistic thinking. And that refers to kind of a right or wrong belief, like it has to be one way or the other, not really much gray area. So it's either black or white, good or bad, etc. And what then happens is as you're exposed to more and more information and cognitively you're developing, you then can shift into this more relativistic thinking. And you think about knowledge as not being necessarily absolute or black or white, but that there's a lot of different potential issues you need to weigh as you make different judgments. So this is where you would get to be engaged in more critical thinking, higher level processes, and this takes some time to develop, but it does happen a lot during the early adulthood years. Since we're talking about early adulthood, we'll go ahead and talk about college. Unfortunately, not everyone who walks into a college walks out with a degree. The dropout rates are pretty significant, and you can see here we're talking about almost half of the students at a community college dropping out and about a third of the students at a bachelor degree institution dropping out. So this is problematic. We don't want to see students start a degree because then they start to accumulate debt and all without having the benefit of the diploma that's going to help them recoup that debt with a higher paying position. So we need to think about what works and helps contribute to success in college. And what we find is that connection is one of the most important variables. Connected to faculty, connected to other students, connected to content. So we really want to make sure that the students who are attending college are feeling a part of a community. And you can see a lot of colleges do different kinds of events, whether it's a student activities fair, it's some kind of orientation program, program, fun social events, as well as hopefully many of your professors are also engaging you in kind of getting to know you activities and things of that nature. Some students are dropping out because of academic difficulty, so certainly we need to provide them with layers of academic support. And if it's a personal issue, we need to help them with their personal issues through counseling, etc. The co-curricular activities or extracurricular activities we talked about in the high school level also when we were talking about high school dropouts, and it is something that is another way to really help students feel connected and a part of the community. And as you can see down here, the first few weeks of college are really the most critical. In fact, many folks do drop out even in the first just couple of weeks or so of the semester. So it's a pretty immediate, either I'm kind of a part of this place or I'm not, and it can have some pretty long-lasting negative impacts. I want to shift gears and talk about careers. I'm actually going to leave the textbook a little bit. They do talk about a lot of different factors that contribute to career decision making, and those are important for you to take a look at. But I want to add to what the author has and bring a couple of additional theories into the conversation. One of my favorite career theorists is John Crumboltz, and he has a theory called happenstance theory. And I was fortunate enough to go out to dinner with him when we had him come and do a keynote presentation for an organization I was leading. And he's really a wonderful, wonderful man with some really great ideas about career. And he says that he calls his theory happenstance because careers are not quite as well planned out as we might like to think. So many of us think you explore your interests and your abilities and values and things of that nature. You pick a career, you try it out a little bit, and you continue on in that career. And he says from his experience of talking to others, that's not necessarily the case. Many people kind of happen into a career based on different action steps that they take. So for instance, you might be open to opportunities and just kind of saying, hey, I was always interested in, becoming a meteorologist. And then someone might know a meteorologist and you might say, oh, can I talk to him a little bit about his career or her career? And then when you do that, you might discover there's a opportunity to do job shadowing, or maybe there's an opportunity for entry-level type position. And that's how you start to end up in different careers. So if you go and you interview folks, and we will be doing this in this class, it'll be interesting to see how much happens there is. Was this planned? Did you end up where you expected to be or not? I'll share my career journey with you in our message board conversation so you can kind of see. There certainly was a lot of happenstance for me as well. He says that one of the most evil questions we can ask children is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And part of the reason it's evil is because we're asking them to make a commitment without exploring. If you remember when we talked about identity, both exploration and commitment are pretty important. So if we ask a young child, say maybe 7 or 8 years old, there's probably about 10 careers that they know of, doctor, fireman, teacher, police officer. I mean, they're the things that they see in their neighborhood. So they're going to pick one of those, and all of those are pretty prestigious, well-respected fields, so they're going to get a lot of positive feedback about it. And then what happens is they're like, okay, that was a good idea, I'll continue to say that. So they continue to say, all right, I'll be a doctor, and everybody gets excited and all that positive feedback about it. And then what happens is they might get to college and discover, oh my, I don't really like these science courses, or I don't like the material that I'm going to have to do. And then they go back and they say, well, maybe I'm not going to do that. And then mom and dad and aunts and uncles are going to be, what do you mean you didn't want to do that? I thought you've been wanting to be a doctor your whole life. But really, in actuality, we kind of box that child into committing to a career way too early. What we want to do is make sure there's a ton of exploration, and college is really a great place for you to explore what options exist. So happenstance theory, I kind of like that one for careers. I hope that you enjoy hearing about that, and you'll probably see it when we get to our career message board. When we think about more the traditional path of careers, we think about interests, abilities, and values. And that is not necessarily a bad way to go about career decision making. Figuring out what you like is important. Knowing what your strengths are is also important. But I think we don't pay enough attention to values and how important they are. And values really do kind of become deal breakers. So if you end up finding a career that is a good match for your abilities and a good match for your interests, but it clashes with your values, chances are you're not going to take it unless you need to kind of put food on the plate for your children or pay, bills so you have a roof over your head. Let me give you an example. Let's say you are really good at working with people and managing and kind of, you like being an entrepreneur, that kind of thing. Your interests are, business, social relations, all of those kinds of things. And there's this great CEO position that they want to offer you. It's a CEO of a company. You're going to be like on the top floor of a building, and you're going to have a great office. You're going to get to make all really important decisions. You're going to have a huge staff to manage, and your eyes are lighting up, and you're getting all excited about it. And then they tell you the nature of the company is a tobacco industry company. So you're in a company that is producing cigarettes and manufacturing cigarettes. Well, if you are anti-smoking, which I certainly hope you are because it's not healthy for you, but if you're anti-smoking, you may not want to be a part of a company that's promoting that behavior because then you might be contributing to folks making some bad decisions that can negatively impact their health and in a pretty significant way with lung cancer, et cetera. So chances are that value conflict is going to make you kind of not take that position. Again, unless it's the only thing that you really have and you have to feed your family. So values are really important, and you want to think about what matters to you. Do you want to be independent on your job? Is it important for you to be able to have a very steady schedule that you can count on, like a 9 to 5? Is it important for you to have opportunities to work with other people? Do you want someone to tell you what to do so you're clear on it? Or do you want to be in a position where you have freedom and flexibility and creativity opportunities? So you want to think about what matters to you today and what might matter to you in 10, 20 years from now, because your values might change, and that is normal. It can be hard to predict, but you want to think about what might matter to me, maybe when I have a family in the future, or maybe after I've been on a career for a while, what might really, be important to me. One additional theory I want to talk to you about is called Holland's Theory. And in this theory, Holland really talks about a person-environment fit. And his is focused on primarily the interest piece. And he says that if you can find a position that has tasks that match your interests, you're going to be pretty happily employed in that field. You can see there's this hexagon figure here that kind of illustrates his theory. And he says there are basically 6 primary themes that kind of capture the different job tasks or interests that we have. And when they're across from each other, they're kind of opposite one another. So I'll start down here with social. That's pretty clear. The people who like social like to work with other people. It's really important that they have those connections. Enterprising is more like the salesy type person who likes to be an entrepreneur, a little more business minded. Conventional likes structure. They want to know exactly what's expected, maybe more of an office worker type thing. Realistic is more of a hands-on. So they prefer to work with things rather than people, and kind of in a more tangible kind of way. Investigative likes to work with ideas. So people who like kind of thinking about things, maybe creative problem solving, maybe researchers, things of that nature. And then artistic, of course, is going to want to have that opportunity to be creative and flexible. So basically, it's a pretty simple theory. If you find a career that allows you to do what you're interested in, the chances of you being satisfied are significantly higher. So I hope this combined with your textbook reading on careers is giving you some really great information, not just for you personally, but for you to think about as we look at developmental issues for early adulthood.